Hello, I'm Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. If you have a question or would like to schedule a session with me, you can reach me at shrinkformen@gmail.com. This is the first in a video series on the similarities between brainwashing, love bombing, and abusive relationships with narcissists and borderlines. It's a reworking of a series of articles I published. I think it was back in 2009 or 2010. I can't remember, long before love bombing became popular in the current vernacular. So let's start with part one. Here we go. How do so many smart people fall for toxic women and men? Why do these individuals remain in self-destructive relationships when their rational adult mind knows better? What keeps them stuck in abusive relationships when the costs are so high to themselves and their children? The short answer is likely a combination of codependency, trauma bond, and repetition compulsion. Of course, there's more to it. There always is. After new clients recite a litany of relational abuses, exploitation, and betrayals, I usually ask, what do you see in this woman? Invariably, most of my clients answer, but I love her. Abuse isn't love. Do my clients love these women? Or did they love the way it feels to be love bombed during the first stage of the relationship? Are they proverbially selling their self-respect to experience the false euphoria of fast, cheap, and illusory intimacy? Have they become dependent on their abuser for a sense of worth and value? Do they exist as an individual outside of the abusive relationship? And by that, I mean, can they see themselves as existing as an individual outside of their abusive relationship? Have they been brainwashed by their narcissistic or borderline spouse, girlfriend, or boyfriend and become psychologically entangled in some kind of Stockholm Syndrome? First, and I repeat, abuse isn't love. Second, love bombing isn't love. It's a form of seduction that employs false flattery, emotional intensity, and basic con artist techniques. Second, if you fell in love with a narcissist or borderline, you were taken in by their false self, not the emotionally immature, unstable, self-absorbed, entitled, self-destructive, characterologically disturbed person they actually are. And the person they are right now, while you are binge reading Is My Wife or Husband a Narcissist blogs and YouTube videos, this is who they are. The person who flattered you and had you up on a pedestal and you felt like you were their hero, that person didn't exist. That was seduction, okay? Look, even if these individuals agree to long-term intensive psychotherapy, they're not ever going to become the person who love bombed you. Please let that permeate your cranium. Third, you didn't even love their false self. You loved the way their false self made you feel about yourself. That you're handsome, beautiful, strong, heroic, sexy, hot, genius-like, a good boy or a good girl, just like your parents probably didn't make you feel when you were growing up. Ergo, once the idealization stage ends and the devaluation stage begins, you feel worthless, desperate, and empty. Now, the Stockholm Syndrome is an actual thing. The term came about after bank robbers took hostages at a robbery in Oslo. No, that's Norway. Stockholm. Stockholm, Sweden, hence the name. Sorry, I have a head cold, so I am not operating on all cylinders. And it involves a captive or captives bonding with their captor or torturer. Same thing can happen in a prison setting. And it happens when the captor slash prison guard or torturer alternates abuse and acts of kindness for the captive prisoner or hostage, and a bond develops, a trauma bond. But the difference between a trauma bond and the Stockholm Syndrome is that in the Stockholm Syndrome, there is actually a gun to your head and you physically cannot leave. Not so with your average betrayal or trauma bond. The prison you're in is in your own head. Okay. Effective abusers and effects of abuse. Abuse wears you down over time. It erodes your confidence, independence, sense of worth, and what good judgment you may or may not have ever had. Since most narcissists, borderlines, and other characterologically disturbed people are chaotic, immature, and psychologically stunted, i.e., what I'm saying is most of them are not rocket scientists. I'm sure there probably are some actual rocket scientists who have characterological disorders, but by and large, these people are often cunning, but I wouldn't say they're intelligent, because if they were truly intelligent in every sense of the word, they wouldn't be so damn self-destructive. So, given that, how are they so effective at what they do? As many clients have pondered over the years, did they go to school to learn this stuff? No, as far as I know, how to be a successful cluster B is not part of any university curriculum, or I don't know, maybe it's going to come out of one of the gender studies departments, but as of yet, not that I know. Typically what happens is these behaviors have been modeled by equally characterologically disturbed parents, similar to how your codependency developed. Now, the most successful abusers, whether they know it or not, use brainwashing tactics to disassemble your personality and extinguish your natural responses to abuse. In other words, you often become numb, emotionally checked out or detached and submissive instead of standing up for yourself, fleeing, or fighting back when you're being mistreated, abused, and exploited. Okay, some people even dissociate, meaning they go somewhere else in their head and they don't even remember some of the things their abusive partners are doing and say to them. That's pretty extreme. Abusers establish control over their targets by, and I quote, using brainwashing tactics similar to those used on prisoners of war, hostages, or members of a cult. That's from a study done in 2000 by Mega and Harris. And if anyone's interested in any of the research I cite in this article, there is a reference list on the printed version of it, and you can find the link for that below the video. Again, many abusers instinctively practice these behaviors because it's what they observed and experienced in their families of origin. Just as I said, as codependents learn to be people pleasers and doormats in order to avoid cruelty and abuse. Of course, it doesn't work. So a question I'm often asked is, do narcissists and borderline psychopaths, etc., know what they're doing? And the answer is yes, the high functioning ones know what they're doing and why. Mid-functioning ones know what they're doing and sometimes know why. And the low functioning ones are just usually blindly acting out and lashing out. In my opinion, the high and mid-functioning ones are more dangerous. Why? Because it's easier to see the obvious train wrecks coming. As opposed to the ones who are better at appearing normal and therefore better able to hide in plain sight. Now I want to talk about brainwashing techniques and the stages of brainwashing. I see the similarities between the brainwashing techniques used by cults on a larger scale and brainwashing techniques that are often employed, albeit unwittingly, in relationships with abusive individuals, oftentimes people who have some kind of personality disorder. All right. In the 1950s, psychologist Robert J. Lifton studied POWs from the Korean War and Chinese prison camps. He concluded that these soldiers, and I quote, underwent a multi-step process that began with attacks on the prisoner's sense of self and ended with what appeared to be a change in beliefs, end of quote. Lifton defined 10 brainwashing steps that occur in 3 stages. Now, where abusive intimate relationships, and that could be with a spouse or a relationship partner, parent and child, a parent and adult child, sibling, friend, workplace relationship, doesn't really matter. When it's just between 2 individuals as opposed to a cult leader and followers, it goes through the first 2 stages and then ends there, and I'll explain why as I go through this. All right. Stage 1 is the breaking down of the self. And the first part of that is an assault on your identity. You are not who you think you are. This stage is an unrelenting attack on your identity or ego. For example, my clients are often told, you're a selfish jerk, a loser, you don't deserve me, no one likes you, your family doesn't care about you, you don't make enough money. The attacks have the effect of destabilizing you and keeping you off balance. The assault on your identity continues until you become, I quote, exhausted, confused, and disoriented. Sound familiar? The result is a weakening of your sense of self, your beliefs, values, and any other healthier relationships you may have. The second step is guilt, in which you are told that you are bad. Once the dismantling of your identity or ego begins, the abuser begins a staccato drip, drip, drip of criticism. You go from being able to do no wrong during the love bombing stage to not being able to do anything right. Throughout the endless conflict and criticism, the abuser puts the blame exclusively on you. Consequently, you begin to believe you deserve to be treated the way the narcissist or borderline is treating you. You feel a general sense of shame that you're in the wrong and that everything you do, don't do, say, or don't say is wrong. Humiliation and shaming tactics destroy your confidence and make you feel bad about yourself, which puts you into a malleable and submissive state. Shame is psychologically, emotionally, and physically paralyzing. Inducing shame doesn't just make you feel bad, it leads you to believe that you are bad. And the abusive spouses of the folks I work with will explicitly say that. They tell my clients that they are bad, horrible people. Of course, when I ask, well, then why does she want to stay with you? There is no logical answer because, of course, it's a lot of BS. The third step is self-betrayal. Would you two please stop it? Step 3, self-betrayal. Agree with me that you are bad. Once you're disoriented and feel a pervasive sense of guilt and shame, it's relatively easy for the abuser to manipulate you, okay? The more broken you are, the easier you are to manipulate. It's just, that's how it works. That includes manipulating you into acting against your own best interests. I'm going to repeat that. This is important. By breaking you down, that makes it possible for the abuser to manipulate you into acting against your own best interest. Please take some time to reflect on that. You forsake your own needs and make choices that are detrimental to your well-being. This is when the abuser may begin to isolate you, if she or he hasn't already done that yet, and or get you to turn against friends and family. In other words, you isolate yourself voluntarily instead of being emotionally coerced or bullied into doing so. This betrayal of yourself, your beliefs, and the people to whom you were once loyal serves to increase your feelings of shame, guilt, and loss, and also makes you easier to control. Once your support system is gone, who's left? The narcissist or the borderline? Lucky you. This is why, animals that hunt in packs will separate the slow gazelle from the rest of the herd, and then they've got dinner. Step 4, the breaking point. This is when you ask, who am I? Where am I? And what am I supposed to do? You no longer know who you are. You're confused and disoriented from the gaslighting, projection, splitting, and being fed a distorted version of yourself and reality. You may start to feel like you're the crazy one and or feel depressed, anxious, traumatized, and experience a host of other negative emotional and physical symptoms like insomnia, paranoia, digestive problems, and other physical ailments that might be difficult to diagnose, like I'm blanking on it, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, Meniere's, illnesses where there's I'm not saying they're not real, but where there is definitely a psychological and somatic connection that are stress related. Okay. So doubts about judgment, perceptions, and your sense of reality begin now. You're doubting yourself. You're doubting what you're hearing and seeing, what's real, what you know to be true. Now, the abuser will tell you that they love you and yet continue to treat you horribly. So on the one hand, your spouse is saying, I love you. No, I don't want to get divorced, yet they're lying to you and telling you you're garbage. There's a huge disconnect. So what many of my clients do is they choose to believe, oh, but she says she loves me. And I'm like, yes, but look how she treats you. There's a big, big gap there. And in my opinion, particularly when you're dealing with people who are inveterate pathological liars, believe what they do, not what they tell you. Okay? The truth lies in their actions. And frankly, we are what we do. If we behave irresponsibly and cruelly consistently to others, then that is who we are. You're a cruel person. You're a cruel, selfish, self-absorbed person. It doesn't matter what you say you are. What matters is how you treat the people in your life. Okay? So, you get told that they love you, yet you're getting abused. So what do you believe? And then you tell yourself that, if only you could find some magic beans, because that's what it's going to take, you could possibly go back to the love bombing stage when you were up on that pedestal and felt like a hero and you couldn't do anything wrong and you're the sexiest man alive. Now, if your abuser has successfully isolated you or gotten you to isolate yourself, what happens then is that you don't have anyone to go to talk to reality test or receive outside support. That's when you're in a really dangerous place. And by this stage, you are likely solely emotionally dependent upon the narcissist or borderline and focused on pleasing her, gaining their approval, and avoiding their wrath or disapproval. And you feel completely alone. Alternatively, if you're still in contact with friends and family, you may not be reality testing them or telling them what's going on and asking for support because you're afraid and or ashamed to tell them what's going on. If that's the case with you, open up to someone you trust. Tell them about it. Abuse thrives in secrecy. Okay, I got to power through the rest of this because I have a session starting. We're almost done. Another reason why some clients don't tell their family or friends what's going on is that they fear that no one would believe them or would understand. And this is especially true if the person who's abusing you has a false self or public persona of a charming, generous, super duper nice person. Super always volunteers for everything mom, for example. The person who has the perfect false self and fake life on Facebook. Okay, now stage 2 is the possibility of salvation, or what I like to call that carrot that is dangled just ever out of your reach. So step 5 is leniency. I can help you. Or what I like to call the tyranny of small mercies. Periodically, the narcissist or borderline will offer you some small kindness, or you'll have an amazing afternoon. And usually those amazing times, as I have said before, are basically just those moments when there is an absence of abuse. There's nothing exceptional about them. They're just behaving like a semi-normal, semi-decent human being for a change, okay? Which you can get most of the time if you're with somebody who is consistently a decent, normal human being. Because your perception at this point is so warped, the tiniest act of kindness or absence of overt hostility and or icy withdrawal fosters gratitude, relief, and a sense of adoration within you. In reality, they're not kind and they're not normal. That is what you have come to believe. That's what you have to believe in order to stay in such a toxic, dysfunctional, and abusive relationship. Now, the disparity between their bad behavior and the good or neutral behavior is so great that the simple act of heating up a can of soup for you can make this person seem incredibly benevolent. In reality, it's the least they could do. The minuscule and infrequent acts of normalcy then cause you to romanticize her. And this is something that once you are out of the relationship, I encourage you to reality test the bejesus out of, okay? This is why I love her. She can be so sweet. Yeah. And those momentary acts of kindness that feel so wonderful, they're actually the opposite of that, okay? They're incredibly destructive because they can instill a sense of false hope. If only she could be this way all of the time. Maybe she will be if I just try harder to please her. The only way you can please a narcissistic or borderline abuser is by continuing to allow them to harm you and then express gratitude for their abuse, okay? That is until they resent you or grow bored with you for becoming the doormat that they demanded you be. Step 6, the compulsion to confess. You can help yourself. You're so grateful for the small kindnesses she or he bestows in between periods of covert and overt abuse that you agree with their criticisms and devaluations. Or if you don't agree with them, you are agreeing with them just to get the pointless round and round and round and round and round conflict to stop, like sticking a binky in their mouths. For example, you agree that your friends are bad for you and that your family is controlling and dysfunctional. Hello, pot meat kettle. You promise to be more attentive and sensitive to their needs and understand that your needs aren't needs. They're just evidence of your selfishness. Seriously, people get told this. I was told this. Alternatively, you agree with the narcissist or borderline, as I said, just to make the rages, the derision, and the accusations stop. By the way, this is why torture techniques don't work for intelligence purposes, because most people will say anything after a while to make the torture stop, whether it's physical or by this time, your personality has begun to change. Now, not your true self, okay? It's the authentic you is still in there, but in likelihood, you are hypervigilant to the moods of the narcissist or borderline. their need for ego gratification, demands and wishes, and you're probably engaging in some defensive mirroring of their behaviors. Okay, people will say you get fleas after you're in a relationship like this for a while because you may start to act like the abuser. You're overwhelmed and confused by their accusations and criticisms, and subsequently, you feel a compounded sense of shame. However, you're so disoriented that you don't know what you're guilty of anymore. You just feel wrong and that everything is your fault. Now, when it comes to brainwashing and cults, there is a third stage to this, which is salvation, which is when you become the brainwashed acolyte, okay? But in an intimate relationship with a narcissist, borderline, or psychopath, there is no point. The point is pointless control with no end to the abuse. Individuals or groups who use brainwashing techniques are deliberately trying to convert followers, change political allegiance, or get people to buy their brand of soda. The ultimate goal is to break down your identity and replace your belief system to make you an obedient follower. Once they achieve their aims, the psychological torture stops because you've become the faithful follower. Unlike professional terrorists, cult leaders, and prison camp commandants, most abusive, narcissistic, borderline, histrionic, and sociopathic spouses, parents, girlfriends, and boyfriends don't have an end goal for their brainwashing techniques. They don't know what they want. They just know that they want to control you in order to feel in control of themselves. This is why they don't progress past the 6th brainwashing step and complete the process through the 3rd stage, which is the rebuilding of the self or salvation of the self. By remaining stuck in the possibility of salvation, you become locked into perpetual hoop jumping mode. She says if you do X, Y, and Z, she'll finally be happy. You do X, Y, and Z, and then she either has a new set of expectations, demands, and requirements, or tells you that you didn't do X, Y, and Z to their satisfaction, or that you only did it to make her happy, not because you wanted to do it. So therefore, it doesn't count. You're caught in a maddening cycle of trying to please her and not being able to please her, with no relief or salvation in sight. So how can you make it better? You can't. The only way it gets better is if you get out of the relationship, reclaim yourself and your life, and begin the work of healing. Now, oftentimes a borderline, narcissistic, and histrionic person's moods, beliefs, and realities change from day to day and, in extreme cases, minute to minute. They want whatever their current mood or insecurity dictates and change their beliefs, demands, and perceptions accordingly, which can be very crazy making when you are on the receiving end of that. The only doctrine they offer is, you're wrong and bad, it's all your fault, it's all about me and my needs and feelings. Then they tell you something like, you need to fight for me, or you need to fight for this relationship. Never mind that they're the one who's destroying the relationship. What this does is it keeps you destabilized and in a perpetual state of guilt, shame, hypervigilance, confusion, and people-pleasing to no avail. These individuals put you into no-win situations or double binds and keep raising the bar of their expectations for as long as you let them, or until they become bored with you and seek fresh supply. You never get to reach the 3rd stage, which would be also incredibly unhealthy, but brings some relief. You stay stuck in that cycle of abuse where you're psychologically tortured until there's nothing of you left. In the next part, I will discuss other aspects and techniques of brainwashing and go into love bombing in greater detail and how you can start to deprogram yourself. Again, I am Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. If you have a question or would like to schedule a session with me, you can reach me at shrinkformen@gmail.com. Thank you for watching and have a good day. And hopefully next week, when I'm ready to do the next video, my voice will be back. Take care.